A new study by the Federation for American Immigration Reform finds that this country's approximately 11 million illegal immigrants cost taxpayers about $135 billion per year in medical, education, and law enforcement expenses. Now, there's an offset to this, taxes. And yet, according to the study, these illegal immigrants pay only about $19 billion a year in taxes. That leaves a deficit, which you pay, of $116 billion. Now, even by Washington standards, that's a huge number. To put it into some perspective, Americans spend only about $70 billion every year paying tuition at public colleges and universities. So if you eliminated the expenses of illegal immigrants, we could make every public college in the country tuition-free and still have nearly $50 billion left over to, I don't know, fix decaying infrastructure or subsidize health insurance to the middle class, or probably a lot more. So it's worth considering as we debate border control and amnesty, these numbers. But we also have another set of numbers, these from the Center for Immigration Studies on chain migration. Now, when advocates in New York or Washington tell you about immigration, they always pretend as if there's an economic rationale for it. It's important, like every immigrant is a high-qualified expert in a coveted field and needs to be here for the sake of our economy. In fact, according to the numbers, government numbers, your typical immigrant to the U.S. is simply related to somebody who's already here, usually a previous immigrant. According to DHS data, in recent years, every so-called initiating immigrant, the first one, has brought an average of 3.5 family members into the country with him. For some countries, the rate is even higher. Each legal immigrant from Mexico has brought an average of more than 6 additional family members here as well. Now, many of these family members have little prospect for contributing economically. For instance, 24% of immigrants are older than 50. So if they become U.S. citizens, they can become eligible for Social Security and Medicare despite paying very little into those programs. Now, none of this is an attack on anyone as an individual. We're willing to believe that most of these people, these immigrants, are good people because they likely are good people. But it's still an extremely expensive proposition for America, far more than most people understand. Now, all of this ought to weigh heavily on Congress as it debates passing an amnesty for DACA beneficiaries. Supposedly, this will only benefit a small group, a limited group of illegal immigrants who came here as kids. But if 700,000 DACA recipients become legal citizens, of course, they, under the rules of chain migration, will bring many more. Estimates suggest millions more, including parents and siblings who may also have entered this country illegally. Now, wherever you are on this question, these are serious matters. They deserve a serious debate in Congress, and yet don't count on that happening. On the left, the only interest is admitting as many immigrants as possible for the sake of getting and holding political power. That's the whole game right there. And on the right, many Republicans only care about pleasing the business interests that fund their campaigns, who'd like to see labor costs kept as low as possible, and low-wage immigration certainly does that. The concerns of regular voters, those who worry about their ability to stay afloat with stagnant wages, pay their mortgage, send their kids to summer camp, pay off their car loan, fear losing their cultural cohesion of their country, no one cares about them. If they think about those worries at all in Congress, it's only to tell voters their concerns are silly, illegitimate, and they're bigots for having them. Joining us now, 2 men behind the studies we just told you about. Mark Krikorian, the executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies. Dan Stein is president of the Federation for American Immigration Reform, FAIR, and they're both in the studio tonight. Thanks both for joining us very much. So Dan, first to you. You produced a study that we just referred to that estimates the costs of illegal immigration. It's very different from the estimates that I hear from people I talk to on this show who are proponents of illegal immigration. Tell us how you got to
the main reason is it's about assumptions. They often mix legal and illegal immigrants, and they parse the data to try to produce these results. We went down and scrubbed the basic raw data from states and local governments when you can get it, from Pew, estimates from the Center for Immigration Studies, and put them together with updated assumptions. And taking a look at criminal justice costs, the children of illegal immigrants cost tremendous amounts in educational care. That's part of the reason why they underestimate the costs. They don't look at education costs, particularly for children of illegal immigrants who are U.S. citizens.
They don't even count
You have to include, no, you have to include those. And they tend to overestimate the taxes. Tucker, low-skill immigration is inappropriate to our U.S. economy. We don't import buggy whips. We shouldn't be importing low-skill immigrants. Most illegal immigrants, low-skill, average income, $36,000 a year. Negative federal tax liability. What you're doing is privatizing profits while commonizing costs on the taxpayer. It's a net loss for the community, for the American community, to be admitting or allowing illegal immigration to occur.
It's a net gain for rich neighborhoods because you get cheap help.
Right,
And
but the
that's a
problem
factor.
is, as Mark Stein likes to say, eventually you run out of neighborhoods, and so they start moving in.
No, it's totally true. So the other assumption that drives me crazy, Mark Krikorian, is that when advocates for illegal immigration say, well, we're going to grant amnesty to X number of people, that's the actual number. And your study suggests the real number is, in fact, much bigger.
Yeah, and clearly we've been much bigger. Now, it would be over a period of years. But if, for instance, Congress just amnestied the people who have this DACA amnesty that Obama illegally gave out, 700,000 people, we're talking at least 1.5 million people over the next number of years that would be coming in after them. But that's actually the narrowest possibility. Senator Durbin and Senator Lindsey Graham have a bill that would not just look at those young people who are covered by this DACA amnesty, but would just open a whole new can of worms from scratch.
So we admit about, I think it's what you would know, about 1.1 million legal immigrants a year. And that's the number I always go with, but that's not the real number, it sounds like.
Well, I mean, in a sense it is, but it would be going up if we legalize more people.
No, but I mean, because of chain migration, which applies to all legal immigrants,
right,
that means you have a net gain of a lot more people than just that every year.
The long-term effect is enormous. For instance, these amnesties in the Senate that they're talking about, dream amnesties, they would amnesty 2 to 3 million people, bigger, some of them, than even the Reagan amnesty of 30 years ago. And so double that number for the future over the next, say, 10 or 20 years would come in, because it's like, remember there was an ad back in the 80s, a shampoo ad, where a girl loved the shampoo so much she told 2 friends, and so on, and you had these multiplying images of her? That's what this is. This is, we give a green card to an immigrant, he sponsors 2 relatives, they sponsor 2 relatives.
It's so dishonest. Riskly, Dan, how can people get away with saying that low-wage immigration is a net economic benefit to the United States? Are they lying or are they misguided?
It's about redistribution. I mean, the elites on top obviously are the ones who distribution. The employers benefit from the reduced wages, and the American people, average Americans, American workers, what used to be the American middle class, they get hurt. They're at the bottom. It's a complete scam. And everything about our labor force shifting to this post-industrial superpower information economy suggests that massive illegal immigration tolerated on a long-term basis, or chain migration that de-skills the labor flow, gives the American people an incredibly bad, poorly served.
It sounds that way. So when you hear people defend it, what they're really defending is their own prerogatives. When rich people defend this, they're basically defending it because they're getting a lot out of it, but you're not.
Well, look, when in the 80s, when I had hair for shampooing, I mean, everybody knew people who actually had relatives doing the work, the hard work. And social distance has increased to the point now where elites are completely detached about the tremendous, terrible impacts systemic illegal immigration and chain migration are having on the American people.
I totally agree with that. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.